Testing. 1, 2, 3, 3, 3.
Thanks for joining the Backlook Cinema Podcast with Zach and Zoe.
On this show, we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear.
That means we're going to talk about some of the best movies from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
So thank you for joining us. Now let's get it started in here.
Welcome to the Backlook Cinema Podcast. This is Zoe, your host, and this is a bonus episode to give you my impressions of Marvel Studios' Eternals. Now, I know there's been a lot of hubbub about this movie, about the Rotten Tomatoes score and all that, some such, and I want to talk about some of that. And I want to give you my general impressions about the movie, my general impressions about the movie without getting into any spoiler territory. So I'm just going to talk in general terms for a few minutes about how I felt about this movie. Not necessarily whether I liked it or not. Spoiler alert, I liked it, but more like my overall impressions. So I want to start off by talking about the people who were involved in the making of this movie, specifically the stars, the directors, and the writers. So this movie stars Gemma, you know what? I don't even know how to say her name. I think I've heard it pronounced as Gemma Chan. Gemma Chan as Cersei, Richard Madden as Icarus, Angelina Jolie as Thena, Selma Hayek as Ajak, Kit Harington as Dane Whitman, Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo, Leah McHugh as Sprite, Brian Tyree Henry as Fastos, Lauren Ridolph as Makari, Barry Keoghan as Jewett, Ma Dong-suk as Gilgamesh, but he is credited as Don Lee in this movie, Harish Patel as Karam, Bill Skarsgård as Crow, Hans Stellman as Ben, and Issa Daniel Cross as Jack. That's as far as I want to go with this movie. Anymore would probably be getting into spoiler territory. These are all the people that you need to know for right now. Oh my goodness, I lost my place. Here we go. So the writers of this movie the director obviously was Chloe Zhao. She was also involved in writing the screenplay along with Patrick Burley and Ryan Firpo. And I guess he wrote the screenplay and story. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll go with that for right now. Anyways, so Marvel's Eternals. Let's talk about how there was a lot of talk about the Rotten Tomatoes score. You know, people almost champion that this is the first Rotten Tomatoes put out by Marvel Studios specifically. That ended up in the movie theater. We're not going to talk about some of the TV shows that Marvel Studios came out, specifically Inhumans. So the Rotten Tomatoes scores, as it stands right now, by the critics, is 48%. And this is confusing to me because in watching this movie, this seems like the type of movie that critics would love. So it is startling that it would receive this score. And for reasons that I will get into later, I'll explain why I find it weird that critics would give it this particular score. The audience, as of right now, has it at 84%. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that has anything to do with a reverse review bombing, as it were. But like I said, I know I liked it. I know Zachary liked it. And there were obviously some issues because no movie is perfect, but it's like it has more well done with it than stuff that has not been well done with it. It's more good than bad is what I'm trying to say in plain English. So let us talk about let us get into my impressions without getting into too many spoilers. So this is Marvel growing up in a good way. It's like we all know what the Marvel formula is, especially with an introductory superhero movie or a superhero team. This is the second time that I've watched a comic book movie. Well, I should say the third time, really, that I've watched a comic book movie. Well, I wasn't really all that familiar with the characters. Like when you talk about Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, I am thoroughly familiar with those characters, so I knew what to expect into going to those movies, and the movies really met my expectations. But going into a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy was like really the first time. I had no expectations, didn't know what to expect, because I was unfamiliar with most of these characters except Drax the Destroyer. And it was a totally different version of Drax that they use in the movies than what they use in the comics. And at the time, I didn't even realize that he was part of the of the team Guardians of the Galaxy, because he had been established long before this particular group of heroes was put together. And then the second time was Suicide Squad. I'm only on the surface familiar with some of the characters of the Suicide Squad, but I had never read that book, and I'm mostly unfamiliar with the concept of that whole thing. And so this is the third movie, Eternals. I've seen the Eternals comics for years, and I never read one issue. I'm not familiar with any of the characters. I don't know any of their names. So I'm going in there like the rest of the audience, like a noob, not knowing anything about this movie. So that gives me a unique perspective of watching a movie like the rest of the audience. I am part of the non-fan audience going to watch this movie. And they didn't have any characters from the previous film show up to try to bolster it in any way. In the same way Spider-Man, with the newest Spider-Man movies, had when they had Tony Stark basically guest star in the Spider-Man movies. So or Nick Fury or any of the familiar aliens. Like no one familiar really showed up to try to bolster this film. This film stands completely on its own, almost out of sync with the rest of Marvel. So this, I feel like it's Marvel growing up, because it basically, I guess someone trying to say it ignores the Marvel formula. It's not as formulaic as the previous movies. I mean, the only thing that is similar is that there are superheroes in this movie, and that's about it. But everything else is so much different than what you might expect from a Marvel film. And I feel like, I don't know if I said this already, but I feel like this is Marvel growing up. This is Marvel saying that let's do something different. Let us experiment. Let's give this movie to the director and just let her do whatever. This is like watching a hands-off experience of what Marvel decides to do when it basically opens up its wings and fly. This is Marvel is like acknowledging that the audience is mature enough and is conditioned enough to accept everything that encompasses the Marvel universe. So in some ways it assuages the regular Marvel formula, and in other ways it opens up like, this is all of Marvel comics right here. This is what comic books about. This is wild imagination gone set free. This is imagination set free when you're dealing with some of the concepts that this movie introduces. So that's one of the things to get excited about. We've all been warned by the media that we might have consumed before this movie was released, that this is going to be way different than any other previous superhero movies that you've seen before. And this is absolutely true. And I think about how I think DC Comics tried to do this. They tried to age up the audience by being darker and being more violent. And the way Chloe Zhao did it in Eternals is they did it in a completely different way. They made it more sophisticated, more character development. It's still a light movie, but it brings so much to the table in its storytelling than we've seen in other movies. So this is my impression is that this is a sophisticated tale. It has lots of moving parts. It has some ducks and feints. It has some the story is going to try to juke you out, and I was for it. I was along for the ride. Now I will say that the beginning, the first act basically started off kind of slow, and it had some I feel unnecessary parts that kind of slowed it down. The pacing was, I understand they're trying to ease the audience into the story, but I think they Chloe Zhao was a little bit too slow in the opening in such a way that I felt like there were DVD extras that were introduced in the beginning of the movie that we really didn't need to see. It's like we, the audience, are waiting for this. We're waiting for the story to pick up the pace. Also, the acting in the first act wasn't quite there, and I don't understand why, because all of these actors are absolutely fabulous in the other media that we consumed them in, on television and on in the movies. They were all fantastic in those roles, and we see them in the first act of this movie, and it just wasn't there, and I don't understand why. It could only be Chloe Zhao's direction that it was that's what we got when we watched the movie. But as the story goes on, then you see a more natural feel to their acting, and I can only attribute this to that. I think that we're supposed to understand an alienness about them. I think that they're trying to impress upon us how different they are from humans, or from who we are, and that's the only thing I can attribute it to, because otherwise it was not what you would expect from these actors. So yeah, better luck next time, I guess. But anyways, but the rest of the movie, the acting is very good. Let's see. I'm thinking about some of the other things that I wanted to talk about, because I had a lot of things on my mind before I hit record, and now it's fleeting. Special shout out to Kamal Nanjiani, who played, let me look this up again, because I've already forgot, because that's how memory works. My memory is absolutely fleeting. It comes and it goes. It's like waves. So Kamal Nanjiani, he played Kingo. He's like the joy of this movie. He really helps carry this movie along, and I really enjoyed him. Also enjoyed Brian Terry Henry, who played Fastos. He was really a joy to watch. Leo McHugh was absolutely charming in a very mean way. She was like mean charming. So everybody did extremely well as far as bringing this movie to the table. And I explained that there were some twists and turns in the story. The villain is like one of those stories where the villain isn't actually who you think is going to be, that sort of thing. And then they take some big swings at they finally introduce the Celestials in this movie. You saw it in the trailer, and they don't skip past it. It's not just like a passing moment. It's like he has a gracious amount of face time in this movie. So to get us to understand who the Celestials are. And it's funny because they kind of introduced them earlier in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. They had the planet Ego, who said that he was a Celestial. But as far as I'm concerned, in Eternals, they introduce the real Celestials and what their actual purpose is. So that is fabulous. So I really don't want to say too much more without spoiling the movie, only that I have a really good time. If you can hang on after the first act and where the movie starts to pick up in the second and third act, and how the story starts to twist and turn, it's an absolute joy to watch this movie. So and like I said, it matured in a way that I can really appreciate, and it goes against the tradition of how ordinary storytelling is have been in the earlier phases of the MCU. So I think that's about it. That's my impressions. I would encourage everyone to go out and see this movie. I thought it was fantastic. And that is all I got for right now. Thank you for listening. And please check out some of our other episodes that we have at you can either find it at our you can find our previous episode at our websites at backlickcinema.com, or you can go ahead and go to whatever podcatcher that you have, and our podcast is available. Check out our past episodes because we're going to go on a 2-week hiatus, and I'll try to put out some media on our social media sites. I'll have the link to our social media in the comments. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Yeah. On Twitter at Backlook Cinema, on Facebook at Backlook Cinema Podcast, and on Instagram at Backlook Cinema Podcast. So that is all to it. Once again, thank you for listening. Hug your loved ones and be outstanding.